Yo, what is up everybody? This is the Alpha J of the Alpha J Show, and this is part 1 of how I'd write the top 10 infamous episodes of SpongeBob. I pondered on doing this, to be honest with you. Although it's not like I'm rewriting this national historical tragedy, these episodes have offended and hurt people. But then again, what doesn't these days on the internet? Let me be clear, these are 10 episodes that I have seen bashed within not only the SpongeBob community, not only the animation reviewing community, but just beyond all of that. Although they may get some praise here and there, many people do not consider these episodes to be the shining examples of SpongeBob past season 4. I personally am going to count them in the order that I dislike them. I will be giving you the first 5 parts this week, and then next week, the other 5 parts will be in place for Thursday, and this time it will come out on Thursday. So standard how I'd write procedure. I usually give a mini review of the overview of the plot, then the problems it had, and how I will rewrite them. Number 10. Are you ready, kid? The Splinter. When it comes to gross out, this episode in particular seems to be one of those episodes revolving that. Sure, House Fantasy has that one scene, and they sometimes show gross close-ups of the main characters from time to time, and Face Freeze seems to be full of this, but the Splinter had effort put into it, and that's why it's so infamous. Keyword, infamous. I personally do not hate this episode that much, which is why it's so low on the list. Squidward isn't necessarily malicious, and they tried to do this in a cartoonish manner. However, they went above and beyond for a series that never intended to be so gore-related. However, when you take the gross Splinter out of the episode, what does it have? A few obstacles that the Splinter gives, Squidward being mildly annoying. What am I missing? Oh yeah.
There appears to be a little bit of swelling.
Hey, do you remember when Viacom uploaded their own videos to sue YouTube? They probably should have made a cringe compilation with all of these gross moments. Mr. Krabs is for the most part normal, I can't be too mad at him. However, this is rewriting the top 10 infamous episodes, and since this comes to mind, I decided to rewrite this. A better way to write this episode is to have SpongeBob and the Krusty Krab working. This day, the Krusty Krab would show a little bit of wear and tear, which can be hand-waved with Krabs not taking the standard maintenance of the Krusty Krab. SpongeBob would be seen working at the job he loves and whoops, he drops some mayo or whatever sauce, it doesn't really matter, on the ground. When he slips, boom, show the close-up if you want of SpongeBob and the Splinter, and also show him trying to get it out. However, this time, let it be closer to closing time. This is very important. He would go over to the hospital, and when he'd see the doctor take out these giant metallic, just frightening and creepy and just lifeless jaws of life, SpongeBob gets very scared and very paranoid. You can even have the doctor clamp it once, with all of the thunder and lightning and horror effects that your heart desires. SpongeBob panics and runs out the door, thinking that the Splinter doesn't really get in the way of his life. This can also reference how SpongeBob is ambidextrous. Any job he needs one hand for, he would just use the other hand, the one that's not injured. However, during this time, you can have those Splinter obstacles come in the way of his normal life slowly. For example, he can try to grab Gary's snail food, which is heavy and needs 2 hands, but the Splinter would get in the way, having the heavy snail food drop on his foot, or just something with slapstick in it. Many instances of this would happen to the point where his thumb would start to look bad. However, one thing I would change is to the camera, we'll keep the grossness dialed back to like a 3, except when there's a close-up involved, then we'll turn it up to a 6 or 7. This way, by contrast, the Splinter is only on for a little while. However, during all of this time, SpongeBob just gets more and more desperate. He even tries to take it out himself again, however he's too weak, or he causes himself more pain. I can see him going through cartoonish antics to try to get it out, such as the rope and door trick you do with a loose tooth. However, instead of lunging the Splinter out of his thumb, it just flings SpongeBob across the room. Little things like that. You can see SpongeBob sad, sitting probably on a bench in a park or something, and Mr. Krabs, Sandy, or someone that's smart but also cares for SpongeBob would sit down and explain to him that he just needs to get this Splinter out before it gets worse. SpongeBob would agree and do it, and when he gets back to the hospital, he has second thoughts, but whoever is with him would prevent him from leaving. SpongeBob would sit in the chair and shake. The music would intensify, and the doctor would take his time, putting on his gloves slowly, taking out the infamous jaws. However, instead of using them on the Splinter, he uses them to open a soda. When confronted on this, He'd show that he doesn't have fingers and therefore wouldn't have been able to open this. You can also hand wave this by having the soda come from above the sea. SpongeBob would give a sigh of relief and start to go on a lengthy explanation on why he was scared in the first place. Oh my god, I'm so relieved. I thought the jaws of life would have just ripped my thumb off. I'm just so relieved. But more animated, I'm sorry, I don't really have the voice of Tom Kenny. While he's explaining, he doesn't realize that a much more scarier machine takes out his splinter, and he doesn't feel a thing. When he finishes, he looks at his hand and he's shocked to see that the splinter is out. And then you can wrap up on SpongeBob, feeling happy and relieved, and not even seeing the scarier machine. Number 9. Cephalopod Lodge.
What's he so happy about?
Be careful what you say. SpongeBob takes wondering why someone's happy to another level. Now, to be fair, this episode gets a lot of flack, but I don't think it's one of the worst. However, out of all of the choices on this list, this episode, the Cephalopod Lodge, has to be the worst when it comes to premise alone. So Squidward has been a part of the secret community and we never knew about it until now. Fine. So Squidward was kicked out of the lodge because of SpongeBob and Patrick teleporting without Squidward's knowledge. Figures. But how do you explain SpongeBob and Patrick getting there just to blow their cover? Also, how come SpongeBob and Patrick cover their eyes when Squidward's underwear is taken off, but literally every season, Squidward is seen with no pants at all? The voice acting in this is just sad. Some of the lines are given in a condescending manner.
The last thing in my life I really enjoyed.
And SpongeBob ruined it too.
At least you still have the hat.
This is coming from the Sea Star that... Wait, no, I'll save that for later. The problem with this episode is that the premise is terrible and everything after that tries to justify it when all it does is intensify the problems in it. If someone punched you in the face for being happy, would you sit there and let them explain their reasoning? No, of course not. In many cases, it doesn't matter why. If you do something solely on the reason of another person being happy with their lives just to ruin it, you are a truly terrible person. They take away Squidward's last true source of happiness. All for what? A day to spend with him? Can you imagine all these Squidward-centered episodes? They all come from Squidward just trying to enjoy his day. Rarely does he ever after Krusty Krab. He hates being there half the time. So could the writers just throw us a bone and actually have SpongeBob's actions be justified? No, it's just a comedy, it's for kids. Oh, my bad. However, it is one of the infamous episodes, and I'm going to outright your lazy version. This one was tough, but I think I have a pretty good premise. So upon research, I realized that squids have a bit of natural predators, one of them being sperm whales and sharks. So I have a pretty out there idea. So let's start off Squidward in his boat, bored out of his mind like usual. It would be your typical day in the Krusty Krab when a person who dresses funny comes to the restaurant and chats it up with Squidward. They'd hit it off and SpongeBob would come and either make a joke and ruin it, or just be his usual brand of clumsy. Squidward would be visibly annoyed, and the mystery squid would say that he'd come back later. Later that week, the same guy from before would come back with a group of like-minded squids. Squidward, happy to serve them, takes their orders for Krabby Patties. SpongeBob would serve them, and as he did, he overheard how delicious they think Squidward is, and how much they'd like him to come over for dinner. All of those typical eating lines. SpongeBob would try to warn Squidward, but Squidward wouldn't listen. As he's convincing, the group would get up and confront Squidward, SpongeBob running away. They would want Squidward to come and visit their group. They claimed to be impressed with his work. Squidward would get skeptical and ask, what kind of work are they impressed with? Because Squidward does art, sculpting, and uses the clarinet. The group would talk it over and they would say like flute or oboe, you know, something that's close to clarinet but not exactly it. And Squidward would correct them, saying it's a clarinet. The group would have Squidward in their hands as after work hours, he decides to at least check out the place. Upon this, SpongeBob decides to take Patrick, although Patrick would be hard to convince at first. When he convinced with either food or some joke, they would go in and spy on Squidward. The door guard would be apparent throughout this whole episode. unlike in its initial airing. He lets Squidward in, clearly seeing that he's a cephalopod. However, when SpongeBob and Patrick try to infiltrate, they aren't so lucky. This becomes your everyday trying to get past obstacle plot, where they try disguises such as hiding behind others, flying over, upon many things. During this time, on the inside, Squidward is given the highest of praise from the group. They even let Squidward play his clarinet for him. However, yet again, they confuse it for an oboe. Squidward would see a lot of questionable things on the wall, such as squid bones, among other things. Nothing too disturbing. He would ask why they keep it, and they would say because it's tradition to keep the remains of all the prestigious members of the society. However, I'm not really sure if squids have bones. They should, right? Squidward would grow even more skeptical as they would make it apparent that they know nothing about Squidward, so he would call them out, even asking for his own name. They wouldn't be able to tell him, so that is when they reveal their ruse. They aren't cephalopods. They're sharks, and they plan to feast on Squidward. However, on the outside, they finally trick the door guard when another squid comes along walking home from work. The poor door guard cannot help himself. When they break in, they eventually find Squidward about to be eaten cornered by sharks. When they break in, they would explain that they eat stupid squids like him every week or so. SpongeBob would take out his net, and Patrick would manipulate the light so the shadow would make the net look bigger and more menacing. The sharks would get scared and don't notice the ruse running off, thinking they're about to get caught. Then you can end on a joke possibly with the squid that the doorman went after being a human in disguise, equipped with a harpoon, and they just run off into the sunset.
I like to call this little number Striped Sweater. The best underwear, striped sweater.
Number 8. Keep Bikini Bottom beautiful. I see a theme here. So when Squidward is in a great mood, but ignores SpongeBob like in Boating Buddies, Cephalopod Lodge, Choir Boys, and so much more, he deserves as much punishment as possible. I also like how this starts over gum, and the cop is always there to see it. If that is the case, and this cop is 100% vigilant, then how come he didn't see the first person who did it? You know, I would not be surprised if the cop put the gum there in the first place just to bait people into getting arrested. They try to be clever with Squidward's dilemma, but it's illogical and not over the top in a good way. The way the cop is just over Squidward's head is borderline abusive. Does watching episodes like this make Little Yellow Book look better? Only a little. Also, before you say that Squidward was completely justified for each of his litters, that is not even a half-truth.
There. That should get you started. Ta-ta!
This is one of the more infuriatingly flawed episodes of the series because of how simple this episode can be fixed. Let me be clear, Squidward is being punished for not letting SpongeBob ruin his day. It's just a cruel cycle of self-aware hypocrisy. I do not like this episode at all.
Some people never learn.
Yeah, let me tear this episode apart before I start to get veins pulsating off my head. The main problem with this episode is that for some reason they seem to be under the impression that Squidward deserves any of the misfortunes that he is getting. This is not the case, but what if it was? That would be my premise here. So let's have Squidward be in the wrong. He would get a note from SpongeBob. No, not like that note. He'd take this note and throw it on the ground. However, the police would see him and sentence him like in the original episode. In this episode, Squidward would also pledge to clean up the Bikini Bottom in a day when confronted by Squilliam. During this time, he would use underhanded tactics to try to get Bikini Bottom clean, doing the least effort as possible. He could, for example, think that cleaning trash is for fish lower than him. So instead, he would get SpongeBob and Patrick to do it. Smart idea, right? While they clean, however, they make mistakes because it's comedy and SpongeBob and Patrick can pull it off well. Let me share with you a few examples, both on SpongeBob and Patrick's side. Let's have SpongeBob and Patrick both open up trash bags. However, SpongeBob opens it from the top and Patrick rips a hole in it from the bottom. They wouldn't show that to the audience just yet though. During this time, you'd be put on a montage of SpongeBob and Patrick picking up trash. However, when SpongeBob's bag gets heavy, he'd ask Patrick how he's doing. He would look over as if he never struggled with the heavy bag at all. Then they would show his trash bag being empty with the hole at the bottom and a trash trail for miles. The police would follow this trail until he reaches Squidward and angrily give him a ticket since this is his responsibility. Another example, but from SpongeBob's case, is when they both have heavy bags. Then they come up with the idea of using a contraption. They try a wagon, but it gets too heavy. They also try using one of those dollies, but they can't lift it up. Then they get conned into using this super machine that looks amazing. It is described as a contraption that can take your item from point A to point B with 0 obstacles except for air or water. When they zoom out, you can clearly see that the contraption that the con man described was a catapult. They put the garbage on it and it flings across town, and it just so happens to hit the car of the cop right on his windshield, possibly even causing him to crash, therefore giving Squidward another ticket. He'd apologize to SpongeBob and go turn himself in, not having enough time to finish the challenge. However, SpongeBob gives him a pep talk, and they're almost done. However, they just don't get it all done in time, and Squilliam wins again. However, Squidward is still proud because of how fast he worked in a couple of hours, and he even receives a medal for cleaning up most of the town in a matter of hours. He thanks SpongeBob. And then you can end on Patrick trying out the catapult only to be flung to like Saturn or something.
F is for friends who do stuff together. U is for you and me. And is for steady swearing, steady time and all.
Number 7. Boating Buddies. Hey look, it's an episode revolving around the main character caring about something he should not care about. Nickelodeon. Remember Band Geeks? Screw that, let's write fan fictions about Squidward. Nick. Putting stalkers first since March 2008. I love how they address the fact that Squidward has a boat in this episode, but everyone I talk to tells me SpongeBob has no continuity. But I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to pull this card. If Mrs. Puff can be replaced, then there's multiple boating schools. If there's multiple boating schools, Squidward should have ran away. Also, for some reason, Mrs. Puff does not care about SpongeBob's recklessness. It is the stupid, oblivious moments that just make me regret not putting Demolition Doofus on this list. But there's always next time. Hint, hint. This episode seems to take a lot of pages from other episodes, and honestly I don't care about episode order. They all kind of make the same mistakes. They take the irrational plot turns from Good Neighbors, as well as their irrational treatment of Squidward from Keeping Bikini Bottom Beautiful. SpongeBob is just way too into Squidward, to a borderline creepy degree. However, if you were to say that it was creepy, I would not argue with you. The fact that SpongeBob is pushing this agenda of boating buddies so hard, and the fact that Squidward has to be punished only for speaking his frustrations is just so great. And I mean that in the most sarcastic, ironic, and offensive manner. It also doesn't help that the writers are self-aware of that.
Squidward, you'll be riding with SpongeBob.
Yeah, I never saw that coming.
Of course. Boating Buddies is a very hated episode because it does literally everything wrong. I'm not sure what the intentions of this episode was, but let me be crystal clear. When you take the personality out of a character and drain them down to one character trait, it delves into the frustratingly predictable. The amount of contrived scenes in this is just annoying. Of course SpongeBob's shoes were on the tough guy's person's feet. Of course the guy in the back was recording Squidward's rants in a crystal clear audio quality. And of course SpongeBob knows nothing about the written part of the test when in other episodes he was shown to be near perfect at that part. I have a great idea for this episode. If the idea of SpongeBob and Squidward being in boating school is so great of a premise, then let us give Squidward a legitimate reason for being in boating school. Remember when SpongeBob asked about Squidward riding a bike for so long? Let that be the reason that he has to go back to boating school. He realizes that he cannot drive at all. This can be confirmed with a crash into a building, preferably a police building or a car or a lake, possibly even a boating school, or just something. Either way, let it be Squidward's own negligence that makes him sentenced to go to boating school, not his paranoia. During this, you can have Puff and SpongeBob interact and have SpongeBob be reckless. I would show SpongeBob failing his driver's part of the test as Squidward is walking up the wooden entrance. He would be able to see up front what he will be dealing with. Let us also have Squidward try to avoid SpongeBob, thinking that he's a great driver. However, when he does the driving part, he is not. His fatal flaw would be that he feels that he does not need a book. So while he aces the written portion, Squidward fails it, saying that all he needs is just to get acquainted with the wheel. Little excuses like that. Mrs. Puff denies. So Squidward dreams about being at that school forever, to the point of him having just like a tombstone at his desk. He would wake up from this nightmare and decide just not to drive at all. As he went to go back and get his bike, his reflection would stop him at the mirror. His mirrored reflection would stare back at what he is. His mirrored reflection would state that he, speaking to himself, is a great person and shouldn't back down from a piece of paper. The paper being either the ticket or the test, being a double meaning. The real Squidward would explain to the reflection that it's just too boring and he feels like he doesn't need it. All he needs is to get acquainted with the wheel. But the reflection says that either way, Squidward would have to deal with SpongeBob, so why not get a boat instead of a bike? Squidward gets behind the idea, but still decides to try the bike. The reflection calls him a chicken, and Squidward would get defensive. The reflection challenges him that even if he did try, he wouldn't pass anyway, so Squidward would take the test out of being offended. He would do a montage of studying and still try to take the test. It is also important that he sits near SpongeBob for the following moment. Squidward would confidently take the test, then lean back in his chair, eyes closed, and smug. SpongeBob would just take a small peek out of curiosity and sees that every single answer on his test is wrong. Mrs. Puff would need to take a call and step out of the classroom just a foot in the doorway. SpongeBob would whisper to Squidward that every question he had was wrong. Squidward wouldn't believe it at first until he realizes that SpongeBob has passed every written test that he had in front of Squidward. But then, SpongeBob would decide to switch papers with Squidward, saying that Squidward should have read the note. The note being that he thanks Squidward for letting him borrow his toothbrush or something, and would do anything to pay him back. The joke being that Squidward did not. However, Squidward accepts and they act normal as the tests are being collected. Squidward would also pass the test. He thanks SpongeBob and calls him his boating buddy. Squidward would then run off happy and smug into the sunset as SpongeBob looks on, before Mrs. Puff cringes at the fact that it is now SpongeBob's turn to take the driving portion. Number 6. Choir Boys. One of the most infamous episodes of SpongeBob. Choir Boys. Just the name brings up anger and frustration to many. I've found a theme in many of these episodes. They seem to revolve around a plot that is grounded to nothing. However, there is a fine line between something believable and something forced. He makes it explicitly clear that he does not want SpongeBob anywhere near the choir recital.
Can I come? 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 Can I come?
No. Does that answer your questions?
All except for that last one.
No, you can't!
However, I can't help but think this is all for nothing because when we see Squidward in the shower in the opening spot, he doesn't seem to sing good, and later scenes prove just that.
What a lucky break! Now I have a captive audience.
Ho ho ho! Remember jellyfishing with Squidward was taped up, but SpongeBob went out of his way to try to help Squidward? Let's look back at that, shall we? From what I can see, SpongeBob follows Squidward due to blind curiosity to the point Squidward's well-being was put to the side just so that SpongeBob can prove a point. But you know what? Let me not go down the obvious route of calling SpongeBob a sociopath. No, this is just a kids show, right? When you look at A Breath of Fresh Squidward, where Squidward pogo danced with Patrick and SpongeBob flipped, it seems so hypocritical that Squidward's hobbies and interests were all single-handedly taken away by this yellow douchebag. However, Choir Boys doesn't have to be so bad because I have just rewritten it. So from what I gather, this premise is about the following according to Wikipedia. Squidward does not want Squidward does not want SpongeBob to join his men's choir, but things go to a wrong turn. I think that sentence should have been better. I'm not sure where the writers went wrong when it comes to this premise. According to my own rules, I cannot change this premise too much, so this may be a little bit of a stretch, but I still believe that the original premise goes along with this episode idea, so let's do this. I think so far this was the hardest one to write. For this version of the episode, let us change the antagonist from SpongeBob to Squidward. Let us also change the protagonist from another person, not SpongeBob. Let us also change the scenes where Squidward is going to the choir. He is already in the choir, but only because there wasn't anyone else joining the choir. So you can say he got hired by default. They also make it clear that if anyone wanted to join, the worst member would be booted, which happened to be Squidward. While this news is going on, Patrick would be walking and stepped inside. They would stop him and tell him that the club is only for singers and singers only. So I thought that the following would be funny. When Patrick would start to sing, I was thinking that when the voice acting starts, either the real voice actor would just go out of his way to just make this episode just be fantastic and have Patrick sing beautifully, Or they would get another voice actor, which would be the more realistic option, and have Patrick just sing amazing. Point blank, Patrick sings amazing. The choir group would stand in awe because of the amazing singing that they're hearing, and Squidward's jaw would drop. They offer Patrick an official audition, and Patrick confusingly accepts. However, for all of this, all Patrick wants is the cookies that are on the table. Yes, there will be a desk of cookies that the choir begs for every meeting. Squidward would seem sad at first until he realizes that Patrick is only in this for the cookies. So instead of trying to injure him or anything like that, he keeps luring him with cookies throughout the whole thing, but they mess it up because it's Patrick. For example, Squidward lures Patrick with a cookie to mess with the piano, but then Patrick would end up making a beautiful song, which would be a nice reference to the other time Patrick made a song. Squidward wants Patrick to tackle the main director. When he does, the director laughs because they both bond over a love of professional wrestling. He would keep doing all of these things, and when the big day comes up for Patrick to officially audition, Patrick would be flawless, making all of the people at the choir go absolutely crazy. Squidward would be at his lowest point, seeing Patrick live out there, living Squidward's own dream that he worked so hard to achieve. The dream that Patrick just came in and just swooped out of his hands. Obviously they accept him, but in a last minute swerve, Patrick's tummy gets full and he denies staying with the choir, walking off. Thus, Squidward stays by default. He sighs in relief until they end on a joke with Mr. Krabs. Mr. Krabs would end up singing beautifully as well, kind of like a book ending. In fact, if I were to go another way, we could have a rule of 3 where Squidward successfully pays off Krabs, then he promises to hang out with SpongeBob when he does well as well when it comes to singing, and then when it's Patrick's turn, he can't exactly crack the starfish, and then the episode continues like I explained earlier. So, what episodes are those gonna be? Oh, no. I'm not sure where the writers went. Oh my god. I'm not sure where the writers went. When? Cephalopod. I cannot say that word. I'm not exactly sure where the writers went wrong